Hi, happy Friday, happy weekend. I have been looking forward to this weekend because there's a party that happens here. It's a fundraiser for a very fun Burning Man camp, and it's a dance party. It's a white party, and it's tomorrow night. So I'm doing this in advance in preparation for the fact that I may not be in the right mindset on Sunday or even Monday, possibly even Tuesday, but hopefully not. So I am I'm going on vacation. I'm planning a vacation. That's what I've been doing this week. And I was like kind of stressing out about it because it wasn't coming together initially. And then I had a breakthrough. So going on vacation is an art form. There are so many different ways that people want to vacation. Like what is restorative to them? What is it that makes them feel like they actually had a vacation? What are the things that take them away from feeling like they're on vacation? And it's very different. I met this guy at the Shabbat dinner. Gonna get a lot of those, I think. I met this guy at the Shabbat dinner, and it was really interesting because he was saying, I hear you guys talking about travel, and I just don't feel that way about it. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, yeah, he's like, I like travel, but it just, it's not restorative to me in the way that it is, that I see that it is for a lot of you. And it's kind of hard for me because he's like, Instagram tells me that I should love travel. And I was like, wow, actually, yeah, you're right. Like, we really have that sort of cultural mindset around that you should love travel, and it's not for everyone. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And then when you think about vacations, right? Like some people think a vacation is sitting in a lounge chair on the ocean reading a book, and then other people are like, I need an adventure. Like I need to be out of my comfort zone. And so like thinking about how to travel with people and thinking about how to have a successful vacation with your loved ones is like really an art form, and like learning how to be very clear about what it is that you need. And one thing we learned early on with families is that you like never go to a place where everyone has to get in a car in order to do something. Do not, like, that is no bueno. The whole waiting and trying to get everyone wrangled together and everyone in the car. Nope, 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 nope. We learned that one. We learned that one early on. That is not a vacation. So I have been spending quite a bit of time this week planning my next trip to visit my daughter in Europe. And that thinking about this trip and my current employment status, I know tends like already people tend to sort of question how I do as much travel as I do. This trip, I mean, it was planned before my life situation changed, but I thought maybe it would be good to share some of the way that I travel because I don't know, I'm realizing that the what I do and how I plan my travel is probably very different from what I guess what people I think would normally do. I don't know. You can let me know. I choose to travel based on whether the universe serves me a price that is so low that I'm like, "Oh, now I have to do that." Of course I have to do that. How am I not gonna do that? Look how cheap that is. And I know that that's not normal. I understand it. But that is how I get away with as much travel as I get away with. That's what um feeds my soul a lot. A lot of it is what feeds my soul. I do not have a purse collection. I don't have a shoe collection. I'm like working on some cute clothes, but mostly I get them from clothing swaps like this. I got at a clothing swap and thrift stores. So my discretionary income goes like to travel. That's just put that out there. I just went to Mexico. I took my son to Mexico for spring break. And the reason that we went there is because I went onto Google Flights and I looked at flights during that week from Denver to the world, basically. And I found the place that I wanted to the most with the least expensive airline tickets was Cabo. And I got 2 round trip tickets for $400. And I took that as a sign that that I was supposed to go to Cabo because that is a deal that is like too good to be true. And like, keep in mind that for me, part of the reason why I love traveling so much is because the majority of my stories of magic and synchronicity and meeting people and learning things and being taken down these like rabbit holes that lead me to these amazing places, that all happens when I'm traveling for the most part. I talk to people, they tell me where to go, I heed their advice, I do the side quests, and I end up finding really fun things. And I have an example of this that happened with my daughter and I when I went to go visit her over in Europe. So I'm going to visit her and we're going to meet in Amsterdam and then we're going to go to Italy. The reason that I'm going to Amsterdam is because once again, I looked up cheap flights and I ended up finding a round trip ticket to Amsterdam from Denver for $500. So I was like, well, obviously that is that's where I'm supposed to go. And obviously that's the length of time that I'm supposed to go. And then it just so happened to be during the tulips. So we're going to go do that. And then I was like, well, I've always wanted to go to Italy and I've never been there. My whole deciding where we go and what we do is literally based on what magical price shows up for me. So for this Italian trip, I just weirdly decide to look at rental car prices because I don't know, I guess because the trains were were being such a hassle. I got a rental car for a week for 83 euros. Like, I guess I should Google whether there's some kind of like hidden fees or whatever that they do, a lot of times with car rental places. But I mean, how do you not rent a car for a week for 83 euros? So then that sets me off on a totally new path because now instead of focusing on the train routes and where we can get by train, I'm looking at what's the most beautiful nature that's happening in Italy at this time. And oh my God, I found like the most incredible things. There's this whole tunnel that's made of wisteria, a wisteria tunnel. Wisteria is a flower, if you don't know what that is, and it smells beautiful and it's purple and they dangle down and it's ridiculous. Like, so we're going on a flower tour of Italy, basically, is what we're doing. And I'm like so excited about it. And I just would never have ended up going off on that tangent if it hadn't been for the fact that the car rental showed up so ridiculously cheap. I was like, well, obviously that's what we're doing. So basically, I'm like looking for like the path of least expense when I travel. And that sort of dictates what it is that I do. I was thinking about Italy and I was thinking like Italy's kind of been this like fancy dress in the back of my travel closet that I've been saving for like the right moment. And I just realized, I mean, if we haven't learned anything in the last couple of years, it's do the things that you really want to do. And so I just decided, yeah, we're gonna go to Italy and I am really, really excited about it. And I'm excited to travel with my daughter because we have a really good travel chemistry. She is amused by the way that things show up for me and she's like here for it. And I think she's got that herself. Of course she does. But an example of this. So I love this story so much. I always have encouraged her adventurous spirit because I know that's not the kind of quality that you could or should dampen in a person if they have that. They have it. It's just in their blood. And she has it. So I decide, though, that if we're going to go look at a university in Scotland, which was where she was looking, that we should go in November when it's like kind of like crappy weather and cold and cloudy, and because I wanted her to get a real sense of what, winter could potentially look like, because Colorado is sunny in the winter. So we go in November and the weather is actually quite spectacular. And we decide to go look at this castle, and we take the bus because I am not learning how to drive on the other side of the road. Like, it's too short a trip for me to take that on. So we we take this bus and we're trying to go out to this castle. We see the bus driver. We're like, "Hey, does this go to, this castle?" And the bus driver's like, "Yes." Cool, cool. So we sit in the back of the bus and we're driving along, and then all of a sudden we see this sign for the castle. Like, we pass it. And so we like ring the thing and go up. I'm like, "I think that the stop for the castle was back that way." And she's like, "Yeah, it's one stop behind." I'm like, uh, I I guess that would have been good to have stopped there. And she's like, "Oh, I thought you changed your mind." I'm like, okay. So meanwhile, we knew it was a half-mile walk to the castle. Like, the castle driveway is a half mile long. So we get off and it is bitterly cold. And we're like, do we wait in the bitter cold another 45 minutes to take the bus back one stop? And then I'm like Google mapping it. And it turns out we can kind of go in the back way. It's like we're still sort of a half mile from the castle. We're just not, instead of walking up the main driveway, we're going to walk in through the back way. That was fully magical because we got to sort of hike the trails that were in the rear gardens of the castle. And then we get to the castle and it's locked up. Like, and we had checked on the website, like, this is like, still pretty close to COVID time, so you never know what's open and what's not open. So we go and we're like kind of standing in the courtyard of this castle, but we can't get in any of the doors and we're trying to figure it out. And just then, these two sweet women with this little baby, like 2-year-old girl who's like running around, and or maybe she was 3, but little, and they're kind of confused as well. And so we start talking and they're like, "Oh, we heard that the castle was closed because of the windy weather," which we're like, "Okay, that's kind of weird." And these women go, "Well, we were on the quest to see a castle. We promised her a castle today. So do you guys want to hop in with us and drive with us to the next castle?" And I look over at Caroline and she already knows. Like, this is absolutely a definite yes. We're getting in these strangers' car and we're driving to an unknown destination that is a castle. And we do. We get in the car and Caroline's playing with the baby and we're like getting to know these women. And one of them is from Oregon and the other one is from Poland. And we're talking and I'm like, "Well, what do you guys do? Like, how are you in Aberdeen, which is the town in Scotland that we were in?" And they're like, "Oh, we're both professors at the university that were touring." And so that was amazing because then we had these like 2 personal tour guides who Caroline and I got to ask like 1,000 questions about, what it was like to go to school there. And so, it's sort of a fun example of like how that all worked out. So that's kind of how I travel. I like to keep things like as loose as possible so that when a side quest shows up, I can go on it and I'm not having to just like run to the next thing. So basically, I have like what I think might be a pretty epic flower tour of Europe coming up in another week or two. So I also really almost never return to the same place twice, mostly because there's just like so much world to explore that I can't. It would be really rare for me to go back to a place. but there are a couple trips that I have done that I'm dying to do again, and they're, like, some of my most adventurous trips, and so I'm, like, thinking about how I would wanna do them again and thinking about how fun it would be. Like, what if I put out there that this is what the trip kind of looks like, this is what the adventure looks like, and what if I collect a group of people who are like, "Yes, I that sounds amazing, like, I wanna do that specific trip, that specific adventure," and then I get to experience this thing that I love again, but I get to have new people with me, and so you get that sort of joy of sharing this thing that you love with other people who have already shown you that this is, like, their jam. I definitely have to feel like I've tried to understand how a local lives. I always go to the grocery store. Honestly, I'm always picturing whether I could live there. Everywhere I go, I'm like, could I live here? Well, let's go to the grocery store and see what that's like. Yeah. The grocery store in Costa Rica was the experience of a grocery store in Costa Rica, and then the experience of coming back to the United States and going to a grocery store was incredibly healing for me. I know that sounds weird, but it was, back during the pandemic, it was grocery stores were pretty freaking terrible. People wearing masks and everyone's like too afraid to look you in the eye, and there's so much separation. And, for me, grocery stores, like, I would try to make them fun by like cracking a joke or saying something to a cashier that sort of, jogs them out of their autopilot, and we can have a funny conversation. And I feel like, I don't know, I just get a kick out of that. So then to have the grocery stores have everyone just be like so shut down and not looking and not smiling, and it was like really awful for me. So I moved the kids and I to Costa Rica for 6 weeks. Which was also pretty wild. It was an amazing decision. It was a fantastic decision, and how that all came together is like a story for another time. Basically, during the middle of the pandemic, my kids and I packed up our house, put it in storage, and took our dog and moved to Costa Rica for 6 weeks and traveled all around the country, my kids and my dog. And it was incredible. But so going to Costa Rica and living there for 6 weeks and experiencing all of the different grocery stores that we experienced, and the times that there would be, like, some of this, but none of that. It was like a Chopped episode, right? Like that cooking show where you'd go in and you'd be like, "Okay, what looks good? And then what can I make with this combination of ingredients?" And then, like, the one time you go in and they have fresh basil, you're like, "That's it. That's, like, what can we do with basil? Because it's a fresh herb and it's here." And so coming back to the United States after that and walking into a grocery store and understanding the vast amount of choice, the fact that I could decide to make anything, like any cuisine, and I could find what I needed in order to make that, it just changed the way I felt about our grocery stores. All of a sudden, they were fun again. Like, I didn't care that people were wearing masks. I didn't care that people weren't looking at you in the eye. I was just so delighted by the variety and the choice and the quality of all of I mean, we're so spoiled. We don't even realize it. You don't realize it until you move to Costa Rica for 6 weeks, and then you're like, "Oh my god, I can make anything. I can make anything I want for dinner." And that's really fun. When we flew down there, I had 4 nights planned out of for the entire 6 weeks. I had only booked us for 4 nights somewhere. The rest of it was completely up for grabs, which is kind of insane and hilarious. Mm, I will say this. I'm feeling a bit untethered, and some days that feels really good. And other days I feel like mm, a little bit like a little boat in a big ocean. And it's been a practice in patience. It's been a practice in faith. And I'm trusting in the process. Trusting in the process. So, of course, I need to say thank you for reaching out and letting me know that you're rooting for me. I feel that and I appreciate it. I hope that you are having a fun, restorative weekend. I hope the weather is beautiful. I hope it feels like spring is in the air. I'm excited about the weekend. I'm excited about this trip coming up. And I am remaining optimistic about what might lie ahead. Yeah. Happy Friday.